Welcome to The Cleaning, a podcast about Apple TV show Silo. This is our spoiler podcast. Don't watch if you haven't read the books in Hugh Howey's Silo trilogy. This is our weekly look at how this week's episode, Season 3, Episode 4, Whatever You Do, Don't Go Home. And we're going to compare it to how it compares to the similar plot points in these books. And spoiler alert for this podcast, boy, not much in this episode really ties to the books at all. But hey, this week I'm going to be talking about book character Mick Webb. Is the show going to cut him entirely? And as we speak of that book character Mick Webb, to me, it really leads to a rabbit hole of why this show is changing the backstory of the Silos from the book. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about it in a bit, but I do not think that the backstory of the Silos on the show is really going to match the story in the books too well. Plus, I'm going to talk a little bit about scars. Juliette's got scars. I think just last week we saw Shirley with a scar. Now, Bernard is alive and he's got scars. If you've read that third book, Dust, you know that scars and how they heal plays a big part. Are they trying to show a lot of characters with healing scars? We'll talk about that. Plus, I'm going to get to your feedback, which is what I love. Now, I've been doing these book compared to the show podcasts since the very first season. And one thing, I've probably never done it exactly like this, where I just list all the changes. And to be honest, there are almost too many to do it, but hey, I should probably do it, so let's get to it. The episode starts with Head of IT Camille talking to that evil algorithm. Now, of course, Camille isn't a character in the books, so she's therefore not the head of IT. And the voice that people talk to, the heads of IT talk to, is never referred to as the algorithm in the books. Camille decides that she's got to knock out the knocked out by rat poison Juliette. But of course, Juliette is never knocked out by rat poison in the books. Sims helps Juliette escape the judicial raiders in the show. At this point in the story, Juliette never had to escape the raiders. Patrick Kennedy, hey, he met with Lucas, who was hiding in the mines. Patrick Kennedy isn't a character in the books, so therefore Lucas never meets with him. Lucas, of course, was never hiding in the mines. He was head of IT in the books, so he wasn't in the mines. Shirley and Knox fight to see Juliette in judicial. Now, by this point in the story, Knox is dead. Shirley, who had a husband in the books, which the show cut out for possibly this romance between Shirley and Knox, so Shirley never has to sneak into medical to see Juliette in this type of way in the books. In the before timeline story in this episode, we see Helen and Daniel kind of grow their relationship. They have a couple of flirty, couple of kind of negging each other moments. Of course, at this point in the books, when we meet them in the books, Daniel and Helen are married. So there's obviously no scenes like this. Daniel meets with a friend at the Pentagon. Guess what? There's no character like that in the books. There's a big race that, hey, we need proof. We need that audio recording of Charlotte's and her plane group's crash in Iran. Nothing like that happens in the books. So if I had to guess about maybe show nods, is Daniel, as I said in the non-spoiler podcast, Daniel says, wow, the first thing I do when a relationship ends is bury all the evidence deep in the earth. That could be a wink to book readers that, hey, Daniel's responsible. Of course, I don't know if TV show Daniel will be responsible for creating the silos, but it could be that. Maybe Helen saying, I'll kill you in your sleep, is maybe a book nod to people being killed in the pods in Silo 1 while they're sleeping. Bernard is alive. Oh my God, what a shock. Bernard died. He's dead in the books. Juliette remembers, hey, I walked down here to the down deep. And of course, she never had amnesia in the book. So doing a book versus show podcast, man, it is tough. If you guys enjoy this, please help me out. Give me a like, give me a thumbs up, give me a hype. Go down in the comments and tell me your thoughts because, again, this kind of book versus show contrast podcast really doesn't have much point other than kind of theories. Well, if they're somewhat kind of sort of doing the books, where could it be going? And that's what I'm going to do a lot in this episode. But first, hey, hold on, maybe I just need to do a little rant, and it won't be my powerful screaming rants that I did back in season 1. Hopefully you enjoyed me being so passionate about something that really isn't that important, a TV show adaptation of a book, but I'm still going to be passionate, gosh darn it. and have a mini rant here. If I went back in time and at the season 2 finale, I told you, hey, you just saw, there's proof. They are not skipping the book Shift, the second book in the series. They're going to cover the book Shift, as you can tell from that scene with Daniel and Helen there in the restaurant. But if I told you on that day, so season 3 is going to begin with Juliette having amnesia and not remembering anything that's happened for the first 5 episodes. And Senator Thurman's only going to be in one scene in the first episode of season 3, and she's not going to be in the next 3. If Anna Thurman's going to be in the first 2 episodes, not in the next 2 episodes of season 3, and she's going to have no kind of attraction to Daniel, if the show hasn't even hinted in the first 4 episodes that these people are going to be behind the creation of the silo, you'd call me insane and stupid. You'd say, no, that can't be. That's ridiculous. If they're adapting this book, certainly they would spend a lot of time getting us to know Senator Thurman, the big bad of the book. They would get us knowing Anna Thurman, the other villainous person from the books. What? That's what you'd say to me. And that's what I'm saying to us, who's read the books. It's like, wait, what? What are you doing? You're not doing any of this? If maybe I had been charmed by Daniel and Helen's flirting, because I said in the very first book versus spoiler podcast on season 3, episode 1, I thought it was smart to have Daniel and Helen not be married like they were at the beginning of Shift and have the audience see them fall in love and be romantic with each other. I thought that was a smart move. Through 4 episodes, now everything's subjective. To me, it doesn't read like a great romance. I'm going to use Game of Thrones as an example, not because Game of Thrones is the greatest, mainly just because I think a lot of people have seen Game of Thrones. But in Game of Thrones, season 1, episode 1, Daenerys and Khal Drogo's meeting, their first interaction in season 1, episode 1, you would think, oh my God, this is horrific. By episode 6 of season 1, those two are in lockstep and they are in love, and you believe that they're in love and passionate about each other. Through 4 episodes, Daniel and Helen started in a better place, but they are not close to being in love. And why do we need them to be in love? Well, if you loved this second book Shift, and I'll tell you why, one of the things I loved about it is their tragic fate. And it's not just a tragedy. It's a tragedy that was caused on purpose. They were separated on purpose. If Anna Thurman isn't incredibly into Daniel, are they going to be separated on purpose? What is going on here? Are they weakening that moment in the book that I loved? Now, again, everything's subjective. Maybe they don't love that tragedy, that brutal, horrific thing that happens to Daniel, Book Donald, and Helen in the book. Sure, okay, maybe they read this book and didn't think that was that powerful. I did. Can the show still get to that point? Maybe, but gosh, it doesn't feel like they're getting there, does it? So since I'm talking about romance, before I even get to Mick Webb, let me talk about feedback I got on romance. 1D Forever wrote, I think this is a good opportunity to get Juliette and Lucas together because Lucas just saved her life in the mine. And he is also the only person she remembers. I don't know. In this episode, she's suddenly remembering George, who I hated as a character in the show. And so, I don't know. We'll see. Zach gave me the feedback that said, hey, Helen could still be Daniel's wife. I guess it will take some time before they actually build the silos. And so maybe Zach is implying, as we do the flash forward to get these silos completed, Daniel and Helen's romance will happen off screen. I think that's kind of a terrible choice, but we'll see. Mark Studebaker gave me the feedback, drill, baby, drill. I put it here in the romance section just because I love everybody's feedback. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for this feedback. I'm going to cover a whole lot more now. But what do you guys think? Are you enjoying the chemistry of Daniel and Helen? Are they going to get there? Are they going to be separated on purpose? Or is it just going to be a bad luck of the draw? I personally loved, as I keep saying, that in this book, that they were separated by evildoers, by people with selfish motives. I don't know. I don't think the book will do it. What do you think? Okay, so I got off track with my passion and my very low energy rant. I'm sure I'll build up to a better rant one of these weeks. Thank you guys so much. But now let's get to Mick Webb. Mick Webb is introduced on page 8 of my copy of Shift right here. And he is a presence through, all the part of the book until the tragedy of the silo grand opening party, as I like to call it. It feels weird that he isn't in these first 4 episodes, and I think he's cut. Don't you? Once again, go down in the comments and tell me what you think. If you're listening to the audio podcast, please, social media at double PHQ. on all your favorite social media apps. I want to hear your thoughts, please. But feels like Mick Webb is not happening right now. If you're somehow a non-book reader who is listening to this, let me just read you through some stats. Mick Webb is a congressman from the state of Georgia, just like Daniel is. Mick is also a Georgia Bulldog, just like Daniel, and hey, just like me. If I could turn my camera, you'd see a picture of UGA, the University of Georgia mascot, right there. If I turn my camera that way, you'd see my diploma from the University of Georgia on the wall. So, hey, I'm glad to be a graduate of the University of Georgia, but the fact that that is not building my rants, that they're treating us Georgia dogs incorrectly and cutting us. Back to Mick, who is brought onto the Silo project just like Daniel is through Senator Thurman's in the books. Now, Mick knows a lot more than Daniel about these silos. Now, to remind you, in the book Shift, the initial pitch to Daniel about this silo project is that's a place where they're going to have a containment and disposal facility for spent nuclear fuel. Okay, so nuclear fuel is going to go into this. And you're like, well, why do they have a living facility? Well, the idea is that in the unlikely event of an attack or a leak, they want to build a silo where all the people who are working at this facility can jump into and be safe, right? Have a shelter. That's the idea in the books. And that's why Daniel says, oh, okay, I'll help with this project. I'll help design this silo. Now, the place they're building these silos, why is Mick so important? It's described in the book as practically Mick's congressional district near Atlanta. So Georgia's a big part of the show. They had the Georgia book back in season 1. Daniel's from the state of Georgia. Mick, if it's not his district, it's right next to his district near Atlanta. In the books, it's implied, because Daniel keeps going to Savannah, that his congressional district is from down in Savannah. And just so you know, when I was a little kid, I lived in Savannah for 4 years. Wow, yeah. So I'm familiar with that as well. And I don't know how far this is into the future, but at least down in Savannah, if you want to represent them and don't have a Southern accent like Daniel doesn't, this might be 100 years into the future. But anyway, okay, so back to, I keep getting off track from Mick. Mick, he knows way more about the project than Daniel does, but he doesn't tell Daniel. He and Daniel are really good friends. They're both congressmen. They're good friends. Mick, even though he's in the novel, half the time, if not more than half the time, it's like Mick is pulled away on his projects in the silo. And so that means Daniel spends more and more time with Anna Thurman. He thinks he's going to spend time maybe with Mick, but Mick's got stuff to do. Mick's pulled away. And so Daniel spends more time with Anna Thurman. Hashtag and not good. Then, of course, on the fateful day, Mick is supposed to go into Silo 1, but he tells Thurman he'd rather Daniel have that role in Silo 1. And that's what we're told. So it has a domino effect of Mick ends up living the life that Daniel wanted to live. Daniel wanted to live with Helen and grow old with her. Because they are separated in different silos, Mick grows old with Helen and he lives that life. Now, I want to point out, the first time I read this book, I just thought Mick was, just another dude kind of swept along by Senator Thurman's plan like Daniel was. The second time I read Shift, I thought to myself, is Mick actually kind of evil? There's this weird moment where Daniel is leaving Mick and he's leaving the project for a bit. He's like, I got to go hang out with my wife. It's our anniversary. And Mick is like, hey, can I come? Like he's inviting himself to an anniversary get together. And then he ends up replacing Daniel as Helen's husband. And so you think to yourself, is Mick part of the evil doings that Senator Thurman and Anna Thurman are doing? Question. I've read it twice. I've kind of skimmed through it a third time. What do you guys think? Did you think Mick was evil? Did you like him? Do you miss him in the show? Is it not important? Go down and tell me. I got this feedback from TR1ST, who wrote, I'm good with Mick being cut, but if there's a time jump for the before times, then it could create room for him to bring him in and allow Anna and Helen's storyline to get closer to the books. I think Per Stenson might take the Mick role in terms of who goes in which silo. And so therefore, Per Stenson would steal Donald's wife, or possibly future wife, Helen. Ooh, not good. Katrina gave me feedback where she said, on the show, we have to go through all this thick book of Shift, and all these things have to happen. And she wrote, I'm struggling to see how the show will do that. I thought at the end of episode 3, where Sims takes his son on his own, it was possible Sims was heading down to the bottom. Ooh, we will see. So, what do you guys think? Is Mick important? Is the show important? Does the show need to have that purposely separating Daniel and Helen when the rush into the silo happens? Go down in the comments. Let me know. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast or watching this on YouTube, please join us in the non-spoiler version of this podcast. We want to talk to you then. And in that non-spoiler podcast on episode 4, I talked about how there's a real divide in the fandom. And I got this feedback that I consider spoiler feedback, so I'll read it. MMM7 wrote, they've left out the F in the word shift and gone down that route, meaning SHI, you know what I mean. Whoa, that is real negative. Secret Goldfish wrote, I'm trying to like the show, but it's really testing. It's drawn out, side questing. I don't like the characters. There's nihilism. Boy, that is also tough. And then we've got Maddie Mazarab. Hopefully I'm getting your names close to being right. They wrote, I'll be honest, I don't usually go deep into discussions regarding movies or shows I liked, but on this one, specifically as someone who read the books, I have to say the pacing and changes don't really make sense. The sanity to insanity of the masterminds of the silo, and he really kind of means Senator Thurman in one way, it hasn't been presented at all. Jules losing her memories killed the pace and slowed everything down. Mick Webb is not present, him ending, so therefore he won't marry Helen. Maddie Mazareb said, hey, there's some good changes like keeping Knox alive and having Dr. Nichols sacrifice himself for the revolution. That was a nice touch. But yeah, there are some negative feelings. And hey, if you have negative opinions, I want to hear them. But hey, if you're loving these changes, I want to be open. Even if I have problems with them, I want to present everybody's thoughts on these. So please give me your positive thoughts as well. I had a couple of questions. Margaret said, hey, how did they get Juliette's badge back in the first place? She placed it on Sheriff Holston before she went over the hill outside when she was sent out to clean. Our great feedback person, Zombie Italian, said, hey, if memory serves, didn't she place the badge on the sheriff outside? Now, let me say, Margaret, Zombie Italian, I'm not saying my memory's perfect, but I believe the way it worked is Sheriff Holston scratched something on his own badge. That badge got placed to Juliette. Then Juliette got a second badge, like her own personal badge. Juliette goes outside and places the badge on Holston's body. That's how I think it went. But listeners, you keep me honest, confirm how this works. Now, as I had that feedback about Juliette's amnesia, Machinery and Scott, they were saying, hey, the showrunners are saying they had to give Juliette something to do because Juliette truly doesn't really appear in this book, Shift. And so they had to give her something to do. But what I was trying to explain in my podcast last week about books versus show is that, well, you didn't have to cut Juliette. You could have just had her do what she did at the end of Wool and at the beginning of Dust, right? Like you could have just done that, but they didn't. Instead, they create this amnesia plot. Black Vi, wrote, I'm starting to realize they are keeping the amnesia until the very end of season 3 because that's the way they can hopefully split Shift into 2 seasons, just as they split the first book, Wool, into 2 seasons. Oh boy. Bill J. wrote, the amnesia storyline is pretty lame. Neither Charlotte or Juliette have amnesia in the books. It's delaying the show. The books have a good story. We're at the midpoint of the series, and they're wasting half the season with this. Okay, so once again, I said it just a second ago. If you are negative, I get it. Keep giving me your feedback. I agree with a good bit of it. But if you're positive, if you like this, please go down in the comments. I want to hear from you. So let's get to the other part of this where I talked about, hey, Senator Thurman's barely in this show. Anna Thurman's barely in this show. Dr. Victor, I think, was only in episode 2. If they're doing this book, they're not really getting to those important characters from this book. And so why would they do it? And why create per stints? And I think in a world, which our real world, 2026 of the world we're currently living in, politics are very divisive. And there could be a thought that because the way it's presented in these books is that all the villains are political, that you could suddenly have these conversations that the show doesn't want to have. Like, oh, see, these people are taking over for us. The government doesn't care about the common man. They just want to start a war or whatever. And so by possibly moving the people creating this silo from politicians to somebody that it's okay, quote unquote, it's okay to hate like a trillionaire, like Per Stenson, maybe that's why they're doing it. And if they're doing that, then do you really need Senator Thurman and Anna Thurman to have play such a big role? That's kind of where I think we're going with this. The show is certainly giving us hints that Senator Thurman and Anna Thurman aren't as important in this universe. Disappointing, but again, I want to know what you think. Go down on those comments and let me know. I've been talking about Bernard being alive in this spoiler podcast for all the first 3 episodes. Now the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows Bernard is back. Now let's talk, why do you do it? Well, let's go to Scars. If you remember the 3rd and final book, Dust, one of the ways we know that the good nanos, as some unscientific person like me likes to call them, is those good nanos. We find out the good nanos are working because their scars are disappearing. Bodies are being healed. Is it possible that you've got Bernard, you got Tim Robbins, you got a great actor? Why not keep him around? And with his body completely covered by burns, suddenly, wait a minute, Bernard looks absolutely fine. It could be Bernard's scars and Juliette's scars, and as I mentioned, maybe Shirley's scars all being healed. That's what tells us, hey, you know what? I think we are actually okay to go outside. What do you think? Is that the thought? Or is it just like, hey, you got Tim Robbins, you keep Tim Robbins, find something for him to do? I'm going to end this podcast by just going over a bit more feedback, which I think leads to some great discussions. Awesome Tech Guy 1706 wrote, gender swaps usually don't bother me. This one really has more because of Donald impersonating Thurman. It's such an important plot point. Well, as I keep saying, you can love a plot point, but if the showrunners don't love a plot point, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter for the show. We'll see. BTHHLL wrote, I think the code to the vault, now this is show speculation, get ready. I think the code to the vault is 552039, which could be a date. And maybe that's the date that everybody is set into the silos and the apocalypse. This is a theory I've heard an awful lot about. I haven't mentioned it mainly because in my own mind, does it really matter when everybody's sent into the silos? I personally think it's good if it was further in the future. Like I'm pretty sure in the books it's in the 40s or 50s. But to have it in 39 isn't that much earlier. Interesting point. It'd be fun to think that the show writers were leaving a clue like that for us. So hopefully. And the final bit of feedback. So this was a big question I was talking about last week. Why go through this rigmarole when by the beginning of Juliette's story again in Dust, you know, Silo 1 is, she's got somebody helping her there in Troy. Why did the show have to have the evil AI still be around? AZ Curly Girl wrote, the AI has to be the big bad because it's the only antagonist of the season. Camille wouldn't be drugging Juliette if the AI hadn't told her to. In Shift, the second book, Thurman is in Silo 1, and, you know, he's an antagonist, but an antagonist to Daniel. Juliette, you know, when she returns, there isn't an immediate antagonist to her. Now, again, as I've kind of pointed out, I called using another Game of Thrones reference, I called the in-silo antagonist to Juliette the Faith Militant, based on Game of Thrones. And so you could just move them up. And I think you could, you know, just have an antagonism of, like season 1, we had an antagonist of the generator. Fixing the generator was the big challenge. And it gave us stress for an episode. Why couldn't it be stopping the safeguard pipe? Why couldn't that be the antagonist? And so, who knows? If you like the AI, if you like the algorithm, please give me some feedback. Guys, next week we're going to be at the midpoint. I think at a certain point, we're going to get a flood of info dumps in these episodes. And will that cheer me up? Will that make me better? Will it make it better for you? Are you loving it either way? Let me know. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next week.